I have my little
Greetings.
clapper action.
Greetings. I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to the Moya University for this opportunity to share some insights into the ageless wisdom, with special mention of our techie assistants, Mike, BL, Rose, and others. And of course, all of you who have taken time from your busy schedules to be a part of this. This work, first and foremost, is group work. And as we start this presentation, we're going to recapitulate a little from our last presentation, and sort of it brings anyone who wasn't a part of the last Zoom sort of a little closer, and it creates a bridge. And I recall DK stating that it's the constant application and study of these laws that is the new seventh ray methods. And it's through repetition that we gain insight that we can retain. Sometimes simply one exposure is not enough. So we have repetition here, but creatively as an artist, we try to often present the same ideas with a different twist. This next quote, which is taken from the introduction to a treatise on cosmic fire, gives us a hint of what the Tibetan master outlined for future teachings. Would somebody like to read this
I'll start,
opening? Please, thank you.
since it's near and dear to my heart. Astrology and electricity. We are not merely seeking to impart more information during these Zoom presentations, but how some of the existing information, which is already given in the Ageless Wisdom teachings, are reinterpreted and shared in new and dynamic ways. This next quote, taken from the introduction to A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, gives us a hint of what the Tibetan master outlined for future teachings.
Excellent, BL. This quote is in two parts. Would someone else like to volunteer to read this first part?
I will, Duane.
Thank you.
During the long course, well, the third phase of the teachings to be given out via the radio in 1919. During the long course of the work, the minds of the Tibetan and AAB became so closely attuned that they were, in effect, so far as much of the production of the teaching was concerned, a single joint projecting mechanism. Even to the end, AAB often spoke of her amazement at the glimpses she obtained through contact with the Tibetan mind, of limitless vistas of spiritual truth which she could not possibly have otherwise contacted, and often of a quality she could not possibly express. This experience was the basis of her often proclaimed but frequently little understood assertion that all the teaching she was aided in producing was in fact only the ABCs of esoteric knowledge. Clear and profound as the teachings actually are in the books published in her name, the truths imparted are so partial and subject to later revelation and expansion that this fact, if consistently remembered, will give us a second much needed safeguard against that quality of the concrete mind, which constantly tends to produce secretarianism. How do you say that word?
Secretarianism.
Secretarianism. And that
That's
was
a tongue twister.
by Foster Daly. Introduction
Thank
to
you,
Cosmic
Rose.
Fire.
The truths imparted are so partial and subject to later revelation and expansion. So how would that look? And this is a question I put out to the group because I've sort of made contributions that I thought might give us some insight into that. But all of you in your different modalities in work will also be faced with that. And you will be required to update, modify, not just step down, which is very important, but as DK would say, take over, bridge into the new, be daring, as Michael would say.
Duane,
Okay, yes,
Asha has her hand up.
okay.
Please go ahead. Asha.
Carrying the revelation further, I would have you remember that the teaching which I have given out has been intermediate in nature, just as that given by HPB under my instruction was preparatory. The teaching planned by the hierarchy to precede and condition the new age, the Aquarian age, falls into three categories. One, preparatory, given 1875 to 1890, written down by HPB. Intermediate, two, intermediate, given 1919 to 1949, written down by AAB, Alice Bailey. Three, revelatory, emerging after 1975, to be given on a worldwide scale via the radio. In the next century and early in the century, an initiate will appear and will carry on this teaching. It will be under the same impression, for my task is not yet completed, and this series of bridging treatises between the material knowledge of man and the science of the initiates has still another phase to run.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to say something controversial here, and I'm not stating it as a fact. I'm simply presenting a possibility. And those who have studied esoteric astrology and race psychology deeply will perhaps appreciate the statement more than anyone else. It is my humble opinion that Michael Robbins falls into that category. But having said that, and I'm in agreement with this quotation, but I also think because initiates are emerging from different ashrams along different ray expressions, that there may be others who are also making important contributions and can be considered initiates. But I simply present that as something for the group to think about. Okay, now
Duane,
go right ahead.
sorry. James, you had your hand up and then you put it down. Did you have something you wanted to say? Now it's back up again.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I was just going to ask, I didn't have the pleasure and good fortune to be affiliated with Moria until after Michael passed on. So I've seen a few videos, but just in general, do we know about anything like he was saying for after 1975? And this is the first time I heard that HPB was working with the Tibetan, which sounds great. So is there anything else that we know? I'm glad you said what you did about Michael, but do we know anything else about the Tibetan giving us teachings after 1975?
Oh, absolutely. When you study the Tibetan's works, you realize that he's outlining a whole new area of revelation. And when he says that it will be given through the radio, if you want to fast forward that, it's not too big a leap to see would be talking about, in today's language, historically, the internet, TV, the modern communication highway, because one of the main thrusts behind the reappearance of the Christ is this preparatory information and series of studies that will prepare us for that stupendous event. And we also have to take into consideration that it's a group event. And whether the Christ chooses to reappear in a physical vehicle is beyond my pay grade to understand right at this moment. But I will say this, there are numerous groups who are in alignment with that Christ energy, heart, intuition, and other energies that this great being represents. And it's a group thing. Therefore, it's always healthy to look to the groups who are demonstrating selfless service, clarity of mind, heart, and also the development of the will. Because DK speaks about the development of the will as an example, to go back to your original question, but he said the teachings on the will aren't going to fully flower until after the turn of the century, and it's going to take even a long time after that. So that's a very, very good question, and I appreciate you asking it. Okay, so what we have here is an image that we saw in our last presentation, but it's a perfect introduction, and it summarizes the quotes that we just brought forward in a very simple visual way. Here's DK saying these four constellations pour their energy down through the earth and are redemptive in nature. And he adds, if you can see the quote from Esoteric Astrology, when visualizing these diagrams, the symbols should be seen in rapid revolution. And to my knowledge, and I'm totally open, and anything you see me presenting here will one day be taken by better artists and more advanced disciples in even newer and more progressive ways. But I feel like I'm sort of a bridge between what has been established by DK, because these statements of principles and laws are not something I've invented. It's something I've taken and in attempting to build bridges by our visualization of these. So let's look at this and do it in sort of a meditative way, where 4 cosmic energies passing down through these 4 signs are coming right into the earth, and from the earth through the master's ashram and into our individual lives. So take a deep breath, focus internally.
Margot devasya
In this image, we can clearly see a number of different things. We can see the triangles because the 5-pointed star has 5 triangles and they all relate to a different level of energy. Thank you, Rose. And each section of that 5-pointed star represents a downflow of energy that in fast rotation, again, becomes the vortex. And that's one of the keynotes of all of my presentations, and we'll get into it even further shortly. The ability to take a triangle, 3 points, revolve energy around it, and then see it increase in voltage and speed until it becomes a vortex. But many triangles can make up a vortex. Doesn't have to be just one set. Okay, excellent.
Duane,
Yes,
we got several comments here.
okay.
Heidi says, I'm in agreement that there are many different avenues of this teaching that are coming forward in many different ways. Synthesis is part of what one is needed to be able to be recognized in the life that is evolving currently.
Excellent. That is so true. The Tibetan has said in several places that all the 7 rays are going to be synthesized at this time historically as we move into the age of Aquarius. And it will not be just one of the 7 rays, it will be all of them in their combined influence, which will connect the very highest to the very lowest. Thank you, Heidi. That was excellent.
Alex says, I notice that these 4 signs indicate 4 basic elements: fire, air, water, earth. And then Lenny says, in all the 4 signs, Mercury, the transmission, is a ruler.
Yes, Mercury, the intermediary and the great communicator. And yes, Alex, I agree with what you shared. Okay, so moving into Walter Poulin has made so many contributions, it would take a full Zoom session of 2 hours just to cover briefly his wonderful work. He's published books, he's traveled extensively to sacred places, and what we're looking at here is a 3D astrological chart. And we're going to see it in motion. But when I first saw this at a presentation at the Moya, the yearly conference, the SRI conference, it was just, it literally had me on the edge of my seat, because not being an esoteric astrologer, I suddenly had revelations about how all this actually works. It's about mathematics. It's about cycles. It's about energies rising and falling. It's about energies meeting and fusing. And we're going to now move to the animation. And I don't have any music because this is so powerful. I don't want even the slightest distraction. So what you see revolving from right to left is all of these different aspects. And I'm going to ask BL, who's really an advanced esoteric astrologer, to make a few comments on this. But I just will read to you a quote from his website Astrologer Dane Rudia also considered chart spheres. Those who consider the three-dimensional perspective important argue that defining house positions by zodiacal degrees alone can often prove inaccurate, since it assumes that the cusps cut through the ecliptic in a straight line, whereas in reality, the lines are curved. That is a very, very profound quote, because in the study of esotericism, and it's not just astrology, you are dealing with triangles that become vortexes, and every sphere has two vortexes, an inlet and an outlet, and they're round. So when I look at this, I get this intuitive sense of something very organic. I get a sense of expansiveness without even knowing all the technical details. But BL, I'd appreciate if you could share with us some insights.
Okay, first off, I want to say I put Walter's homepage link in the chat.
Thank
So
you.
Astrolog is a program that you can download for free. He's got some wonderful other things there on his website. I mean, it really boggles my mind when I look at this stuff. I'm basically your flat chart astrologer, and when I saw this, it was like, oh my God. But one of the things that it does is, like Duane said, it emphasizes the fact that everything is an art. Okay. Now, when we talk about astrology and the orbs of planets, whether they're a square or what, we're talking about the degree of the art there when we're doing it. And that's one of the things you can see this way. Another thing they talk about in astrology, and it's really getting down in the weeds, is the elevation of the planets, if it's above the ecliptic or below the ecliptic. It could be conjunct, but it's not necessarily at the same elevation. And this will show you that. It shows you, how it is. It's just amazing to consider it in this way. And you can look at your own chart this way, your natal chart, and see what all those energies were at the time of your birth. And you can look at transits and current things going on. It totally boggles my mind. I have to say that. Okay. Now we're getting all kinds of comments on this. So let me see. Okay,
BL,
first off, yes.
let me make one last statement and then we'll open it to questions. And the question I want to ask the group is, how many have used virtual reality goggles? Could we see a show of hands? And if no one has, that's fine. Okay, Michelle, two others. These virtual reality goggles that you position on your head, they allow you to take what we're looking at right here and step into it, to look at it from the back towards the front, to each side, and to even position yourself if somebody developed the software properly for these virtual reality goggles, where you could be in any one of those little positions and see it even more fourth dimensionally. And it's like, it's the way of the future. And right now, these virtual reality goggles are primarily used for entertainment. And that in itself is not a bad thing. But when the esotericists the newer generations of esotericists who are savvy with these new techniques, they are going to just fly with this. And I'll give you a small example, and then we'll go to the questions. People that are going to be medical doctors in pre-med, they used to take people in and have them cut up cadavers and see each organ. And then I think then they built cadavers out of plastic, and you could take the models apart. Well, now in some medical schools, you have the presiding professor, and they're all standing in a circle, and he presents the human anatomy through these virtual reality goggles. First, let's say the skin, then the muscles, then the nerves, then the different glands and the bones. And he can strip those away, and yet you can see it all as a composite, or you can break it down into its different parts. It's a whole new way of using the visualization capacity that DK spoke about when he outlined in Cosmic Fire the teachings for which he was responsible to present to humanity. And it was a new use of the visualization capacity. Thank you. Okay, questions?
Right. We have one that's a follow-on from the five-pointed star. Heidi says the rays are also represented in the signs as well as the background field that is holding those rays.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Each sign has multiple rays that affect it. They can be esoteric or hierarchical or just mundane. Okay, excellent. Thank you, Heidi.
And then James says, in reference to this diagram, it might help to see that at the very center is a point representing the person or event whose chart is a sphere around it.
Yes, spheres within spheres. And this is a perfect example of what I am trying to share here, often inadequately. Walter took his inspiration from Dane Rudyard and perhaps others not mentioned here, and he took it to a new level. And what James has just shared is an excellent point. Now you can see that there is a central point there, but that could be modified in certain ways to indicate the soul, the master's ashram, or other principles and laws. And this is how these teachings are going to go forward, by people stepping out of their normal space and being creative and seeing how it will work for them. And I suspect there are others in the group who are saying, okay, this is great. I like this. This is different. This is new. But you know what? I would have a different background. I would do this without violating the integrity of the original chart. Excellent. Any additional questions?
Yes, there's several, but I would like to say also that this is the representation of us walking outside and looking up at the sky and where everything is in the sky, or where it was at the time of our birth or where it is today. And I believe there's apps for that now, where you click on something and it geotags your position and it tells you what the stars are around you. That's very similar to what's happening here. So there's other representations of this in different applications. But yeah, I think seeing this in three, or with the what are they called? The goggles, the VR goggles would be
Yes.
absolutely. I mean, I'm considering that's how old I am. I'm considering myself as in a planetarium or in an IMAX theater with a planetarium above me, you know.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
I don't know how many of you have ever had that experience, but
It's
it's pretty cool.
awesome. It's
Okay,
very cool. Beautiful
let me,
analogy. Thank you, BL.
okay, we have lots more comments. Okay, and I see James' hand up. Hold on a minute, James. James says the ecliptic is the circular path that the planets appear to move around the Earth. Yes, that's true. And we think of all the planets and everything being on that ecliptic, but they're not really, as you see in this 3D.
Yes,
Some are above. I mean, that's what I was talking about earlier. That's the declination, whether it's above the ecliptic or below it.
right.
So, that shows that. And it's just as important. Again, it's the weeds in astrology. It's just as important to have a conjunction in a sign and degree as it is to have one in declination if they're together at the same spot above or below. So, um, okay. And then James said it can be seen as, the ecliptic is the purple line. Um, Asha says, not only curved and also planets moving and accelerating fast forward constantly, so constant change in motion. Yes, because the planets move at different speeds, right? Seems
Yes.
to me as a simple non-astrologer that a static chart has inherent limitations. Oh, right. Sure. But let me tell you, how many of you, I want to see, no, I don't want to see a raise a hand because we don't want to lose James, but um, it takes forever just to learn that static chart, doesn't it? All the nuances in it. So are you ready, Asha, for the 3D with the VR goggles? You were one who said you'd used VR goggles. Okay, let's see. Heidi says, this appears as a binary stars. As they spin, there is an innate communication that is occurring.
Yes, what we see here can be applied in so many different ways. Thank you, Heidi. The stars. Okay,
Jessica
excellent.
says that we got
Go
more.
ahead.
And we still have to get to James. Jessica says, I guess that means VR, or she's been inside this
Oh,
as a close tie to
yes. Thank
Walter.
you, Jessica, for gracing us with
Okay,
your,
I have 6 new messages, but before I do that, let me get to, and some of them are yours, James, but let me get to James, who's patiently had his hand up, okay? Go ahead,
yes.
James.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just trying to help everyone see as much as they can out of this. Down in my comments, there's a link to a free program that's on the web that lets you step inside at any place and any time on Earth and see where the planets are, and you can move it through time.
Cool.
So one thing is right now in the center is a green convergence of a bunch of lines, and you can see the house numbers 1 through 12. So if you imagine segments of an orange, those are all the houses. And then up above and below are the signs, and also has the lines. And so that's partly why this is so complex. And then there's the equator. Let's see. I'll just go ahead and let BL cover my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. He says you would see this animation if you had a paper chart, held it at the top and bottom, then rotated around and could see through the paper. Then he goes on to say the website Stellarium, and he gave the link, is that free astronomical view of the sky that can be set up for your location, date, anytime. And I think that's one of the things that, apps for the phones now. I mean, you can go outside and click on it and it'll do it, or you can even do it in the house and it'll show you what's going on. Me, I don't use phones, and so I can't figure it out. But my little sister is an astronomy buff, and she loves hers. So, Okay, Maria says the 3D visualization can also be developed using the inner vision. Wow.
Yes, that's important because according to all advanced initiates, looking at an image or a symbol, can have several levels of meaning, but they all have to be drawn up onto the high mental plane. And simply looking at them passively can inspire you and it can get things moving, but you got to pull it way up from the lower mind to the higher mind, because then you can springboard into the holistic organic intuition.
And then Greg says in the world of Second Life, or does he mean 2D life? It says Second Life. They are already using this kind of 3D focused animation in creating a wholly different world that your avatar, a character in the game or world, becomes the center point of 3D perspective, and it's taken to a new level, I believe, through using the 3D virtual reality goggles. So,
Well, imagine, Greg, if those programs were geared towards taking the ancient wisdom teachings and building these programs around that information. Wouldn't that be pretty startling? So thank you, Greg. We'll have to check that out. Okay, just a
Lenny,
couple more questions and then we're off.
okay, we got 6 new ones. Lenny says the center is the radiant origin of life.
Yes, the Laya point, the point of pure abstraction from which everything emerges.
And then Greg says, is time in this graphic the fourth dimension we're considering?
Well, that's a good question, and I can only quote HPB when such a profound question is asked, where she states in The Secret Doctrine that space is an entity and time is the duration that entity has chosen to work out some aspect of its purpose or plan. So time and space have an intimate connection. One uses the other and they're compatible. Okay.
And then Mary says, I use Skyview Light and Skywalk too. You can point and feel these movements. Those are applications. So there's plenty out there that will help you do something similar to what Walter has presented for us here. Okay, I got 4 new messages still to go. So
Okay.
let me see if I can get through them. Heidi says it also allows the awareness of recognizing the fluidness of life, its constant transformation that is occurring simultaneously.
Yes, and keep in mind, excellent, Heidi, thank you, that it's the Deva evolution that brings these qualities of fluidity, that humanity is more relating to race 3 and 5, and the Deva evolution more to the 2, 4, 6 feminine line. However, you can find the Devas along any ray line, and any human being from the influence of the 3rd and 5th ray can pass over into the Deva evolution and learn their mystery, learn their secrets, and that the Christ, when that reappearance takes place, it will be the result of this great being bringing large legions of healing devas and angelic lives that will heal not only just individual people, but groups and on a planetary level. So organic is the key word, which is compatible with synthetic. To me, I see the wholeness, the unity between those two words. Okay, next question.
Michael says the Tibetan emphasized the importance of triangles. Consider that each energetic relationship between planets also create a triangle with the center point.
Yes, and we're going to shortly, after these additional questions, jump right into triangles on a more personality or microcosmic level. So thank you, Michael. Next.
Jessica says all astrology externally is within.
Yes, everything we're looking at in this beautiful rotating sphere is inherently within us. And sometimes there's a peculiar paradox where we can leave an aspect of our personality to study and research these ageless wisdom teachings only to find that we're coming back to ourselves. Isn't that a curious thing? We go away from some aspect of our identity on a lower level only to return back holistically, organically, intuitively. Thank you. That was a very important concept.
I like to
Okay.
think of it in terms of we're evolving, and every time we go around the circuit, every time the planets hit different things in our natal chart in transit, some fast, some slower, we're spiraling upwards because we're learning new lessons with each spiral. That's my take on it.
Excellent.
All right, Vivian says, in my understanding, DK has said that the astrological signs do not correspond to the astronomical. There is a leg for the psychic influence on our lives.
Yes, that is so true. And I'm going to let you answer that, BL, because what she just shared, Vivian, is so true that the astrological and the astronomical are not always in sync. And he has reasons for that. And that's also the reason why the 12 zodiacal signs are divided equally when in reality they actually are not. Some signs have a wider berth. But BL?
Yes, what DK tells us in EA, and I'm sorry I don't have the quote handy, but what he basically tells us is that yes, it's true that the astronomical and astrological do not currently coincide. However, the astrological has a more esoteric meaning. And what he's talking about is
Yes.
the I can't think of the name of it, the precession of the equinoxes. At
Yes.
one point, and that was at 29 degrees Pisces, between Aries, age of Aries, the very end of the age of Aries, the very beginning of Pisces, they matched. And they slowly drift apart. It's like 72 degrees a year or something like that. It takes 30 years, I think, for it to move. I don't know. I don't have the math in my head right at this moment. But the whole point to this is astronomically, they don't change. And that's the difference between the sidereal and the tropical zodiac.
Yes.
Tropically, and what DK was telling us that the esoteric truth is that the signs correlate astrologically to the equinoxes and to the solstices. And so the tropical zodiac artificially keeps it so that 0 Aries will always be spring. 0 Libra will always be fall. 0 Cancer will always be the start of summer, and 0 Capricorn will always be the start of winter. And that's where the difference is, because over the 2,000 years or whatever it was that it took them to, I guess it takes 2,000 years for it to make it the 30 degrees.
Right.
Over that time, that drift happens, but that the thought forms that were built up with what Aries meant and what spring meant and what the ram meant, and all of those thought forms that are so important in astrology, the myths that go with it, that is esoterically important. So that's why there's two different things, and that's why we use with esoteric astrology primarily the tropical zodiac.
Thank you. Rose wants to squeak in a question here or a comment.
Well, this is a fascinating subject, and one thing that just keeps coming to mind, especially with this last question about the location and its effect with the astrology, is I think we also really, really have to keep in mind what is space, what is distance, and on many levels, if space is considered an illusion, then where is location? So if something, when you stretch it all out and you make it linear, then this is here now and that's over there, or this was there and this, but it's all part of this greater matrix where we've already shown that a biolocation, one object or one point can be in multiple locations at the same time. There's a whole nother dimensional aspect. And so that's where I think this is going when the Tibetan says it's not necessary for one location to correspond with where the constellations are now to where they were. So it can get really down the rabbit hole. So I just think we have to always keep that in mind.
Well, has not quantum physics destroyed time and space as people have normally associated with it?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
so we're talking conventional science here. This isn't New Age pink fluff. Excellent. Okay, we're going to take one more question, then we're going to move on.
Okay, well, there's a series of them here from James, and then Jessica has her hand up. So, and
Okay.
then there's others I can't even see at this point. But James says, yes, due to precession of the equinoxes, they were about 30 degrees apart now. Not quite. So if you look at the planet in the sky, it will not be at the position at which a ephemeris says it is at all. It depends on if it's a sidereal ephemeris or a tropical ephemeris. And then he says 72 years per degree gives 2160 years for each sign. That's pretty close to what they figure for precession. Basically, DK gives us some clues in esoteric astrology, and the age of Aquarius, when they're going to be exactly 30 degrees apart, is supposed to begin the delineation at 2170 or something in that neighborhood. So and he talks about the overlap between the age of Pisces going out and the age of Aquarius coming in, and there's an overlap of the influences, and that's one of the reasons of the turmoil. But anyway, yes, it's 2160, or there's a couple of other figures in that neighborhood for what they should be for each astrological age. And the age of Aquarius technically is going to start in roughly, this is per DK, roughly
Yes.
2170. So, okay.
Excellent.
And then Jessica, you had your hand up. I don't see it anymore. Did you want to say something, Jessica?
And after Jessica, we're going to move along. Well, Jessica, you speak up when you get this message.
Hi. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. This is just a quick point. I just wanted to thank Rose for making that point, and also that there's a synthesis occurring as this workshop is occurring of maybe it could be likened to quantum entanglement, that the old and the new are merging together as one. And I that's what I took away from what Rose said, and your point after, Duane, which was that it's not new age stuff. This is, science. It's so interesting because in the quantum world, anything is possible. And I think that's what the Age of Aquarius is. It really shows that and highlights that. And I think that's what we're stepping into again. And the Age of Pisces perhaps was different in the sense that maybe we had forgotten that for a while. So, anyways, I just wanted to highlight that, and also to say that we are all collectively here creating this as we're experiencing it. So it's, us shaking the hand of, like you said, parts of ourselves that we've left behind, and yet it's quantum. So do you know what I'm saying? It's hard to articulate.
I think you're doing excellent. And I
Thank
think
you.
everyone here would agree. And I want you to be sure to tell Walter all the excitement his spherical charts created, and how it actually became as you just said, a point of group focus, in which is more organic because you have different people contributing, and we're all looking at this, and I include myself, in new ways by the comments. So we want that. Excellent. Thank you, Jessica.
Welcome.
Okay, one more and we're going to move forward. If there's one more question or statement, doesn't have to be a question.
Well, I thought I saw a hand, but by the time I got to look, it was
Okay,
gone. So,
okay, thank you.
oh, Lenny says astrology is a main branch of occultism.
Yes, absolutely. And to recapitulate, one of the goals of this work is to bring in additional information around these two important sciences. The science of astrology, which DK has indicated is the most ancient of the sciences and will be taking a new form at the turn of the century, which we've been into for 25 years. And DK also says, and I apologize for the repetition, but it's so important, that the science of electricity is one of the most important sciences that humanity is now being exposed to, and you might say is one of the newer sciences, even though the yogis and the saints and the mystics have known this. It's only recently, just as Jessica eloquently pointed out, that science is now contributing. People who think that science is against religion or science is devoid of metaphysics are just not up to date with the revelations that are taking place. Okay, excellent. So here we have a diagram of the centers, and I think this probably was originally taken from Brennan. I've forgotten her first name, who did her healing book. And it's a good chart because it shows the centers are sort of multidimensional, that the energy can come in from the front, the energy can come in from the back. And okay, so this is probably one of the most important charts that I have shared, and I have shared it many times, and I will continue to share it because, to my knowledge, it's the only chart, generically speaking, that outlines the major chakras and the triangle relationships between them. In other words, when you study the meditations that the Tibetan has outlined, and this is particularly graphic in Discipleship in the New Age 1 and 2, he gives techniques of how the energy has to flow between the centers. And even though this may seem a little technical and a little dry, it's actually the roadmap of light back to source. And everything in astrology, everything in metaphysics is based on polarity. It's based on the release of energy, or the damming up, or the tension of energy as these multiple forces come together. And this is so beautifully demonstrated here. Okay, let's just take the first initiation, remembering that this is a second ray solar system, so that the love vibration is what's pushing or pulling, depending on how you look at it, the evolution forward. So when I briefly outline a few of the initiations here, always keep in mind that the heart center is opening a little bit more each time. Okay, first initiation. When you see the sacral center and you see slightly to the left of the violet disc, symbol of seventh ray energy, you see a positive and a negative. Most centers are either positive or negative. Some centers, like the Ajna center, are actually dual. To undergo the first initiation, you have to transmutate the seventh ray energy from your sacral center up into the throat. And the primary triangle, not the only one, but the primary one, is throat to the base of the spine, to the sacral center, lift it up to the throat, and then back to the base of the spine. So what happens in this triangle is that you're lifting the prisoners of the planet that reside in the sacral center. You're lifting them through the science of redemption, the law of redemption, to the throat center. And you see a lot of this through the arts and science in different areas of living. And what happens is, in the early stages, the sacral center is considered positive to the throat center, which is considered receptive or negative. And when enough of the elemental substance in the sacral center is now drawn up to the throat, those poles flip. And I wish I could demonstrate to the listener how easy to understand that is. If you take two magnets and you put them on a table and you bring them close together, those magnets, one or other or both, will spin so that they can connect, they can be compatible. And what do you have from these two magnets? You now have one bigger magnet. Well, sacral center to the throat, redemption of that which is, you might say, lost in the lower regions, now is given light of active intelligence. Okay. Then when that is done sufficiently, doesn't mean that you're not active sexually or have energy that you can demonstrate in that center. It just means you're not dominated by it. Okay, second initiation, the centers on the left are the masculine centers, the centers on the right are the feminine centers. Okay, let's take the second initiation. You take heart energy and you draw it down to the base of the spine, and then you come back up, drawing the solar plexus energy up into the heart. And this is not to be confused with the egoic lotus, which you see at the very top in the center of the crown. That type of energy is much more advanced. But this is the energy from the heart of the solar system that will take you through the second initiation. Solar plexus to the heart, to the base of the spine, solar plexus to the heart. And every revolution, or every time you create that triangle and you bridge those 3 points of light, because they all have their signatures and they're all composed of angelic and Davic substance. It's like baking a cake in the kitchen. You can have all these ingredients on the shelves and in the pantry, but until you put them together in their right combinations in the right order, until you do that, there is a lack of scientific understanding of how you bake a cake. A cake does not just appear because you want it. It appears because somebody is skilled in the art, in that culinary art. Okay, second initiation. And keep in mind, if you look at this chart, you'll see in the solar plexus center, it has 2 colors. It has pale, light blue, and rose, both associated with 2 different types of Davic groups that will be used in this magical process. This is alchemy, this is white magic. But note, in that center, there's a white line that goes directly across, dividing it into 2 parts. And this is one of the greatest stumbling blocks of the esotericist at a certain point. What kind of energy emotionally should I be working with, and what kind of emotional energy should I not be working with? Because when you look at that white line that divides it, that goes horizontal, the lower part is the lower psychic involutionary emotions of fear and hate and intimidation and dread that every person who lives on the planet experiences to some degree. And above that white line is the 3 higher subplanes of the solar plexus center or the astral plane. And the white line would be considered pivotal. It's the crossover point. It would be considered the 4th, and the 3 lower would be involutionary. When you can create a triangle and you can lift those, once again, prisoners of the planet. And I always say these prisoners of the planet that make up a part of who we are not bad. They are not sinister. They are not evil, even though they can do very bad things. They are trapped and they are waiting for redemption. And like unruly children who will just go and run riot until you bring some discipline, some direction into their lives, it's not going to work. You have to be able to guide them. And every time you pray, you meditate, you study these charts and the hundreds of others that are out there, if not thousands, you are lifting those energies below the diaphragm to above the diaphragm. And so what happens is that the heart, which is negative in that it's not, until the second initiation, the heart can be embryonically stimulated, and it is so at the first initiation, but it's really at the second initiation you get a real download. And that rose energy will become a golden yellow hue in the heart center. And then the solar plexus goes from being positive to now negative. And the heart now becomes positive rather than negative. Excuse me, I stated that incorrectly. The solar plexus was positive, negative, and then after the second initiation, it flips and reverses, and the heart energy opens up and flips and reverses. Okay, now those are just the first and second initiations. And I'm not going to go any further because we've done this several times and it gets a little more complicated with the higher triadic energies, but that'll give you some background because we're going to do some animations that are going to show all of this actively at once. But one more. Okay, now this is the same chart that you've just seen, only we're moving away from the fifth ray more into the fourth ray. But I don't necessarily mean technicalities, the science of the fifth ray, into the beauty and culture and civilization of the fourth ray, which is certainly an expression of the fourth ray. I'm talking more about the intuition. What you're looking at is the same chart, only you're seeing the multiplicity of triangles, because what you saw was an oversimplification. It really only dealt with the major triangles, but there are many secondary triangles and peripheral triangles. So you can begin to see, and Michael Robbins and I used to talk into the wee hours of the night, and he would share with me his idea of the tapestry of the gods, which you all know is the name of these beautiful, beautiful books that he has created. And I would present him with all of the ways that I saw it sort of from the fourth ray. And it was a great sharing. And we could both see how immense this subject is. Okay, now we're going to see an animation, and we're going to see two animations. The first one is a very simple one, and I'm going to be sharing a few thoughts about it. And then the second one will be actually for meditation. Now, if you look at this, how many can recall some of our earlier discussions around triangles, and that triangles are not isolated? We can start with a simple triangle, but the triangle between you and two others is very important and very advanced work, but eventually it'll become fused into the group's triangles and all of the triangles that the group members make. And can you see what DK referred to in these earlier presentations, where if you look at a square and you bisect it just the right way enough times, you're going to end up with what he called the star of life. And the reason why the star of life is so important, it's a tetrahedron, is because it combines the upper triangles that I just failed to share with the lower triangles when I spoke of the initiatory experience in the earlier chart. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to see this revolving. And as it revolves, you will see all types of symmetry, all types of Platonic solids rising and falling. You can see it as a cube. You can see it as a triangle. You can see it as a lattice work of diamonds. Remember, DK said that when the rays and the planes are brought together at the right angle with the right coloring, you will have a revelation around the serpent of wisdom. And I will not say that this in itself can cause that, but it can give you a sense of the organic nature of triangles and how the serpent, which is sinuous, it turns and it spirals. And when you see it moving through the grass, any little garden snake, you can see the dynamic, the rotation back and forth. It's very, very Davic. Okay, excellent. Now we are going to, and then we're going to open it up for comments and any questions. Now we're going to see these triangles, and this is also called the Sri Yantra. It's been used in Hinduism and is considered the most powerful of the occult symbols. And you can easily see why. Okay, so the next image, we're going to take a deep breath. We're going to relax and feel yourself moving into this symbol. This symbol is you. It's organic, and it summarizes, fortunately, all that I have indicated, not only in this presentation, but all of the previous ones. And I understand this is a big claim, but I can make it because it's not about me. It's about you and your ability to access that intuition.
Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva tatsavitu vareniyam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva.
Are we ready for comments yet? We have a lot of them.
Yes, we are ready.
Okay. Maria says, we are perceiving the projection of truth into lower dimensions, planes. Some beings are able to have an awareness of what is going on in the higher dimension of being. As we open ourselves to those higher dimensions, all these questions change and our knowing shifts.
Excellent. Yes, the questions change because our awareness shifts and we're taking in greater wholes. And DK makes references continuously, just as Blavatsky does in her teachings, and Steiner and a whole bunch of others, that it's impossible to put into words. And yes, these images, even these animations, are not the thing in itself, but they are one step closer. And if you're a second-rate student, what is visual is so important, because now you can take this, close your eyes, and without straining, duplicate it on the high mental plane. And I guarantee you, whatever type of meditation you do, whatever level of triangle work you're on, you take this, you see it organically moving inside the mind's eye, and you will feel the movement of energy very powerfully. Okay, questions, comments? Maria, thank you.
Jessica says, from doing to feeling, the will, doing, solar plexus, the heart, feeling, and transmuting doing for the sake of it to stillness, 0 point. Also fine tuning what moves us to do things and allowing the divine to take over our doing. Thy, not my, will be done.
Oh, that's very eloquent and very beautiful, Jessica. Thank you. There's a key word the Tibetan uses, and you have to be receptive. And if you're always got the lower mind actively engaged, inquiring or deducing or analyzing, which is important foundation, you might miss until you step back what it's alluding to. And you can't, this is where Rumi says you have to be submissive, not to some guru, not to some other personality, to be receptive and submissive in that. And this is a major threshold thing with all meditators. You're using a seed, you're visualizing some image or some word phrase, or you're using some mantra. Where do you stop and become completely open so that that which you are invoking can now be received into you? Because if you keep thinking about the mantra or the word of power or some part of your meditation, if you overly analyze it, the very thing you're attempting to contact will not come into your auric field. And the Tibetan wants each disciple to have a strong mind, because then you will never experience any of these lower negative astral entities that are just floating around the planet, because there's so much anger and pain in the world at this time. So you keep your mind poised, and when you begin to feel that downflow, when you begin to feel that heart energy, you feel that expansion, you can let your mind take a different position, which is as a recorder rather than as the dominant factor in the meditation. I hope I didn't make that too technically exacting, because that's what you're going to read in the Patanjali's different stages of the sutras. Okay, thank you, Jessica. Any additional comments? Any additional comments or
Oh,
questions?
sorry, I was
That's all
talking
right.
away and I was unmuted.
No
Mary
problem.
has shared a couple of images in the chat on the reversal of the wheel and what the chakras look like at that time.
Excellent. That's
And
very
then
much appreciated.
James says, is there any writing that describes what a person is like after each initiation? He says, I mean,
Absolutely.
so that you can tell where your work is focused.
Yes, the Tibetan clearly states probably the most important thing that you can recognize in your spiritual work is where you are situated on the path. Now, some people, they have a hard time with that, because they say, oh, if you are always analyzing where you're at on the path, it creates all these negative thought forms, and it makes you the center of attention. And there's a lot of truth to that. However, there is a higher self-reflection which is more impersonal, and it simply wants to know where you're at, or where I am, because I want to know what's the next step. What would be the next series of teachings or triangles or devas or colors that I need to work with? And this is what is meant as an Aquarian science. It's based, anybody who wants to go to my website and pull up like the devas, that I just printed a book on the devas, and on, it's called Form and Meditation, but it's a synthesis of what DK and HPB said in color and sound. And all kinds of other links with many, many animations. Go there and just look around. Just intuitively go to any place you feel called to. Because yes, every one of those triangles, and keep in mind that when you activate a triangle, just because you going through another initiation or a higher part of an initiation doesn't mean that that lower triangle ceased to exist. It means, to quote the Tibetan, it becomes a base note. It becomes a base color. It becomes a base geometry of which the superstructure is built upon. To go back to our many conversations here, where you don't just trash the old because you think you're taking over the new. No, you're moving into the new to redeem and regenerate the so-called trash that still might linger in our lower vehicles. This is redemption. It's like kids in school. The people who just graduated from the third grade into the fourth are often instructed by those who just left in the fourth grade. And it's an interconnecting grid or series of energies. Okay, any additional comments?
Yeah, we have a whole bunch. Heidi, I see your hand, but I also have about 10 messages that I want to try and get through. Mary says, thank you so much, Duane. This clarifies a lot. I want to use these charts in my classes, but your explanations clarified tremendously.
Thank you.
Let me see. Heidi says, interesting, the diamond energies are protective energies.
Yes, a diamond, which is really two triangles, has many times the potency of a single triangle or a square. A square is like a sieve. Any kind of negative energy comes into your auric field, it just passes right through. You take a triangle and you pass a diagonal line through the square, and you have two triangles. And when those triangles become a diamond, or they become faced like a tetrahedron, now they repel. All outside influences are repelled because you have ensouled and you have sheathed all your bodies, your physical etheric for better health, your emotions for high aspiration, and even your lower mind to understand all these little tidbits of information into organic wholes. That is all facilitated by triangle work.
James says it's rotating front to back. And Greg says also as an octahedron.
Yes, you will find all of the Platonic solids in one way or another, or some part of them, when you take triangles and you set them in motion.
And then Francis says, it's been said that being is greater than doing. Thy will, being, my will, doing.
Absolutely, Francis. Thank you.
Jana says, please share the link for the last video. Thank you. We will share the link for all of the videos that Duane is showing us today. So, and then Michael said that. So,
Excellent.
Francis said, it is said that the Gayatri is the mother of all mantras. I think the yantra could be considered the father of all symbols.
Yes, when you study the ageless wisdom teachings, the mystery schools like Pythagoras and other ones, they all have as a part of their teachings the Platonic solids. Each one of those has a geometric shape that's slightly different, and although they can ensoul or they can be nested, is the key word here, into each other. And we'll get into that when we do our divine geometry presentations. And this is all preliminary work of the reemergence of the mystery schools, understanding the Platonic solids, how they relate to principles. Only now we have the advantage of computer animation. I mean, how good can it get? Any additional comments?
Yes, we have a whole bunch, but let's get to Heidi, who's patiently had her hand up there forever. Go ahead, please, Heidi.
I just wanted to thank you for that visual, because if there's a deep presence and you're able to hold the vibrations of these fields simultaneously, you're not holding them. It's not a personal holding, but the Buddhic plane is actually holding them. You can witness the relief of those beings that have been imprisoned. It brings it into the feeling like a wave into the heart. And then the heart actually starts to distribute the energy where it is needed now. So it actually brings it creates this real flow of movement through the system. And it's held in the vibratory, you could say ashram, but it's held in the plane, the Buddhic plane, and it's actually speaking directly into that plane as we are in service to the wholeness that is actually occurring simultaneously through our willingness to be of service. And that means that the personal will, like you were talking about, these little parts of our, that want to do whatever they want to do and they don't want to come together, that they actually are held in, I want to say, compassion through the heart. And then through that holding space, the Buddhic plane actually can descend its wisdom. And then there is a relief and a release. And then that energy gets transmitted to where it is needed at any given moment in time. Anyway, I just wanted, that was my experience through the presencing of that beautiful animation that you gave. And it touches life in such a deep way. And I feel so grateful.
Well, thank you. And I equally am grateful for your shares and everyone else's, because it makes the group more organic. If you see your individual triangle merging with other individuals' triangles, eventually you get a group triangle. And this flashing forth is very, very important, because DK says that when a triangle meets or overlaps with another triangle, you get a flash of light. In that, when you do a triangle with other partners, and in time, when you're doing it with a greater group, what happens is each one is building the Antakarana bridge through divine geometry. And this idea of the Buddhic plane and the emotions is so important. The Buddhic, when you look at the rays and the planes as being spherical, and that they also have spirals within them, you can see how the Buddhic plane is not separated. The lowest subplane of the Buddhic plane connects with the highest subplane of the astral. And they're not separate principles. They're multi-dimensional principles that are semi-permeable, that occupy a similar but different space. And I realize I'm really speaking in contradictions here, but You know, a mother, when she gives birth, and this is true of the father who participates in his special way, if their child doesn't have either all the equipment or has certain, let's say, liabilities or difficulties, do they abandon them? Do they say, oh, this wasn't what I wanted, I'm going to just take it to the closest orphanage? And I realize this is probably a poor analogy, but it's the same thing with the elementals who exist within your lower vehicles. They are not the problem. They are just in the dark. Can you expect a 6-month-old or a 1-year-old child to know how things work? They don't. So these involutionary entities cyclically wait, to quote to the Tibetan, for their day or opportunity that some greater life will come and they will repolarize them electrically, because they're all looking down into a dark pit. If you have read Plato's Republic about the illusions and the shadows on the wall, and most of humanity is hypnotized by all this, it's just a puppet show. You have to turn around. And that's what you do with the lower mind. You have to use the lower mind to sit down, to pay attention, maybe even to all those shadows on the wall, and then eventually say, you know, I'm getting tired of this. This is old. I've done this before. Isn't there something else more enriching and more beautiful and more dynamic? And when that frustration gets powerful enough, you will say, I've had it. I'm leaving. And you turn around, you do a 180, and guess what? The light coming from behind, which is the true essence of your nature, is now there for you to step into. Okay, one more comment and then we're going to move on.
Okay, we have a whole bunch here, but Lenny says the surrender allows the soul to be penetrated from superior energy.
Yes. And someone once said, well, someone once asked the question, what's the difference between praying and meditating? And this is not entirely accurate because there's many variations. But the answer was, in prayer, you're asking God for something, whereas in meditation, you're listening for God. And again, this is not inaccurate. You can use prayer and meditation compatibly in every sense when you meditate. But when the lower mind is always asking questions or always demanding answers, the very thing that it's seeking, it's like a plane. It's like calling down a cosmic plane, but with too much mental focus, there's no landing place. There's no crossover. And that's the paradox of the lower mind, the higher mind, and the intuition. Okay, one more and we're going to move on.
Okay, well, then I'm going to move down to the bottom. Lenny says we have now a very higher triangle within the cosmic being, such as the center of the galaxy. I don't know that word. It entry with the universe, Aquarius center within the galaxy, and humanity center within the solar system.
Excellent, Lenny, and thank you. And this is what advanced groups focus on. They have done sufficiently triangle work individually and within groups, and now they're attempting to bring in these cosmic forces that reside in these outer constellations, these outer star systems. And just one last comment before we continue. This idea of Buddhic energy and healing the planet. Right now, one of the functions of the hierarchy is to create a triangular grid, just as we're creating one on our personality levels, around the planet, so that, and this is almost a direct quote from the Tibetan, so that decaying constellations on the etheric level, these great, great beings that they threw off their lower vehicles and went on to higher dimensions. Well, where does that stuff go? Just like where does our stuff go when we throw it off? And it's coming down into our system. Etheric energy of a very low quality that the hierarchy has to deal with. And how do they deal with it? Amongst other important laws and principles, they create this grid of lighted substance through triangles around the entire planet. We're just learning how to do it individually. Advanced groups are doing it as a composite. There are whole groups of divine contemplatives, like their Nirmanakayas, that assist in this. They bring the light down, the hierarchy receives it, and they literally build in this saving force, this grid. And so it's no longer just, oh, I'm trying to insulate myself from all these bad vibes, or yeah, there's a couple bad vibes in the groups I work with. I got to insulate myself from them, or help transmutate it is perhaps a better phrase. It's the same thing on cosmic levels. And the last thing I'm going to share is an insight that I've gotten from working with these teachings for 50 years, and it may not be accurate, but I think it is, and it's this. We are in a school, and one of the teachings of this school is to learn to do triangle work, because as we advance in this triangle work, as we begin to do it within groups, we realize we're being trained at some future point to take over the positions that the members of the hierarchy have done, because they're being released, they're going to a higher level, and we going through all these lower initiations, and this happens at each initiation, but it becomes conscious at the third initiation that, oh, there's a bigger plan here. And that if I don't get my act together, and I realize this is a travesty of the English language, but if I don't get my act together, those below me will not have the freedom, will not have the liberty, the sovereignty that I now have. And every organism that's more advanced than a lesser one is not just excelling and reaching out for greater light, which the hierarchy does, but it's also simultaneously reaching down to lift those who are close enough to receive its gifts. Okay, we're going to go to the next slide. Thank you. And if you want to post any additional questions or whatever, just put them on the okay, let's see. I think I may actually skip a few of these, and we'll get into them in our next presentation. But I wanted everyone here to see triangles relate to vortices, and this is Nassim Haramein, and he's an advanced disciple, initiate, physicist. The guy is just off the charts. He's so advanced. And this is from his site, and he's showing here the electrical circuits that are around the Earth. Now we know there's all kinds of belts, and this is an oversimplification, but imagine that each one of these is like an initiation. And as you pass from the lower, you enter into what DK would call the rings pass not of a higher entity. Rings pass not. You can't pass through until you've paid your dues. You haven't paid your dues until you've learned the science of initiation. You can wait passively, because we're all going to get there sooner or later, and let the social, let the cycles just take us in these directions. Or we can say, you know what? I'm going to bring my will to bear, and I'm going to assert the fact, first ray mantra, and I'm going to dynamically push myself into the periphery of those lives, those greater beings of whom I know nothing. Do you see the difference between being swept up in certain cycles versus penetrating through the power of the will, the opening of the heart, the intelligent understanding of new techniques? And DK said new techniques are coming after the turn of the century, and they will not replace the older techniques, they will be built on them. And this is how you can tell if something is legitimate or it's not legitimate, because if it doesn't coincide with what's already been given in some way, if it's just some fabrication, it may not mean it's totally wrong, but you have to be discriminatory. There's so much stuff out there on the internet. Okay, so let's move to the next image. This is from NASA. And it shows that these belts that I just showed you in the previous image are actually made up of striated electrical and magnetic particles, plasma of different types. And again, we're not going to labor this too much other than say that everything is layered with semi-permeable energies. And when I say permeable, that means that they have their own identity. They exist differently than the next layer, but they can be penetrated because each layer has enough of the other layer to be able to become a focal point to move to the next higher level, the study of electricity. Okay. And this is magnetically, I think this is another NASA image. This is Venus and the Earth. And just as we build triangles and vortices as individual people and between groups, and it's done on a planetary level. And you can see how it's like a figure 8, because to go back to our little humble chart that we shared with all the centers earlier, if you were to imagine on the left is the Earth and on the right is Venus, Venus is positive to the Earth, which is receptive or negative. And how the energy flows is like a figure 8 because they're opposite poles. And Venus feeds through the solar lords that have come down in waves, the planetary Earth. And it's a beautiful symbol of what's happening on the inner planes on a fairly large cosmological level. Okay, I'm going to skip down, and I apologize for a sort of a closing meditation, and then we're going to, okay, we're going to use this as like a closing meditation. We're going to close a little early, and then we'll have open discussion and more comments or questions. This is a torus, and it is faced with triangles. It has the colors of the 7 rays. It has the colors of the 7 planes. And you should imagine as you're watching this that you're actually viewing 7 of these. You're only going to see 1, but it's sort of in 3D, so it doesn't take too much to just magnify this. And imagine you're looking down through the skins of an onion, and you'll begin to see how triangles work and how they connect to each other, not just in a sphere, but on multiple spheres. So take a deep breath, relax, and feel, as Jessica said, feel with the higher part of the emotional body and the heart. Feel this image and your ability to step right into it. It's a portal and it's a door. I do not know who the original artist was of that, but I have to say it is so profound that I've been looking at it for years, and I still am amazed at how evocative it can be. And we're now going to open it up to any comments or any questions. And I skipped over a lot of stuff, but we will pick up where we left off. And the group is really, to a large degree, guiding me. I have certain outlines and whatever, but it's vastly affected by your light and the needs potentially of the group. So this is good. That's what makes it organic. Okay, any comments or questions?
Well, I skipped over some earlier, so let me see if I can get to some of them.
Okay,
Maria says an interesting link on magnetics, if you have some curiosity, and she gives it to us. The debrief.org scientists have solved this anti-gravity mystery. So
excellent.
that's in there in
We
up
take
to
any
21.
contributions. Thank you.
James asked what your website was, and somebody posted, oh, he posted it.
Thank you.
So thank you for that. Mary says, thank you, Heidi. My vision with your comment. The chalice Hercules carries all the red cattle, the little parts towards the divine. And then
Excellent.
she means in the 12th labor of Hercules, Pisces. Greg says that's why it's so important for all of us to do the triangles work when possible with others in our sphere of influence. With this work, the whole expression is carried forward into a higher expression and comprehension.
Excellent. Thank you, Greg.
Someone asked about the triangle work, and I referred them to Lucis Trust.
Thank you.
They have lists of people who, want to set up a triangle. So let me see. Andy says new levels of magnetics are being discussing in cosmic science.
Yes, the Thunderbolts project is one of the key contributors to the new electrical theories being revealed daily in science. It's called the Thunderbolts project.
Andy says exactly, so dramatic. There's just so much out there, and we appreciate, Duane, everything that you're doing to show us little glimpses of it.
Well, thank you so much. The feeling is mutual. And I'm going to be putting together some longer meditations. And I think these short ones are very powerful, but I feel intuitively that if I made available some longer ones, it could be of some use to the group. So we'll be doing the mini ones next Zoom, but I'm also going to make available longer ones for those who are so inclined, so they can
Well,
meditate on it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, we can take them and we can put them on your website where we have your presentations. You know, we
Okay,
can put them up at the top, you know, just the longer
awesome.
video presentations for meditations and stuff.
Excellent. Okay, are there any additional shares?
Well, mostly people just answering everybody
Oh,
else.
okay,
Heidi says there is a beautiful, vitalizing energy. The group is bringing forth much needed healing to humanity, touching into the places of deep suffering. This is the Christ energy interfacing into the living life of the planetary being.
beautiful. So poetic and yet so alcoholically correct. Thank you, Heidi. Okay, we're actually going to finish 6 minutes early. That is a record for me. Thank you all for coming. I send my light and love, and thank you for making this possible.
And we hope to see you in March for the next one, which will be on the 9th of March.
Excellent. The 9th of March. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.